Hello and welcome to my first video tutorial. Today we will be doing even count flat peyote stitch. This is a stitch I use quite often, so that is why I am going to be starting with it. So today I'm going to use this nice big needle and I'm going to use these melty beads or perler beads because they're easy to learn with and they're also easy to see on the video. I'm going to be using this nice thick thread as well so you can see it. These beads are one of my favorites to teach with, so let's get started. The first thing, let's thread our needle. Pull your needle through your thread and make sure you have enough working thread. Now let's pick up this red bead we're going to use as our stop bead. Pick it up, leave some as a tail, go back through in the same direction, creating this little loop. That's our stop bead. If you can move it like this, if it moves freely, you're good. If it doesn't, that means you went through the thread, and that's going to be a mess later on. So why don't you go ahead and cut that off and try again. Okay, now we have our stop bead. Now we're going to do the tricky part, starting flat peyote stitch. In flat peyote stitch, you pick up your first row and your second row at the same time. So here I'm going to pick up two different color beads. The white beads will be our first row and the blue beads will be our second row. So this is how it looks strung on your string. Here is our first row, these white beads, and these blue are our second row. As soon as we add our third row, that's when you're going to start to see it you're going to start to see the difference between the rows. So I'm going to use yellow for the third row. I'm going to skip the white bead and go through the first blue bead. Careful not to get your thread. Go through, pull it tight, and snap it into place. This third row is always a tricky row. As you can see, it doesn't want to lay flat for me, even with these big giant beads. But once you get past your fourth row, you'll be okay. So here you go. Say first row, second row, third row. Pick up another bead, go through the next blue bead, so you're skipping the first row white bead. Pull it snug so it pops into place. Continue again. Just keep continuing until you get to the end of your row. Pull it tight and pop it into place. And here you go. You have your first three rows. So here is your first row, your second row, and your new third row you just added. So it's kind of in a diagonal here. First row, second row, third row. Okay, so let's move on to the fourth row. The fourth row, I'm going to use these green beads. I'm going to do the same thing in the opposite direction. Skip the first bead, go through the second bead or the first up bead. As you can see, there's a down bead and up bead. Your beads will go in between those up beads. So here you can see this is now let's pick up another one. Go through the next up bead or the next third row bead. And continue on. Pull it tight, get them snug in there. And there you go. Now you have 4 rows of flat peyote done. The white again is our first row. And our second row, you can see how things are staggered. Gives it that kind of classic look that most people think of when they see this stitch. So here, okay, now again, just back in the opposite direction. So orange bead goes through the first up bead and to continue on just like that. Pick up a bead, go through the next up bead, pull it where it kind of pops into place. We can talk about tension at a different time. And just continue until you are done with that row. And now we have 5 rows. You can see here is your first row, blue, second row, third row was in yellow, fourth row is in green, and our fifth row in orange. Basically, you just continue on this way. So let's see. We're going to pick up another bead and go through just again and again. We do this on each row. Go through the up beads, pull them snug in their little homes. There we go. Okay. There. Now we have 6 rows. And you can see the stitch coming together. So let's move on to the next row. Pick up a pink bead, go through the clear up bead, and then continue on, pulling them snug into their little places until we get to the end of the stitch. And there we go. We've added another one. Go back other direction. We'll use purple for this row. Pick one up, go through the up bead, pull them snug until you get to the end of the row. And there you have it. Once you get past that first row, it's a fairly simple stitch to learn. So there's our first row, our second row, third, our fourth row, our fifth row, our sixth row, our seventh row, and our final 8th row. And you can kind of get the idea of how the thread path goes through the beads, and you start over again going through the up beads. So let's talk a little bit about how to hold your beadwork. You can do it a couple different ways. You can work it this way, horizontally. You can work it vertically, which is what I choose to do. And you can flip it, which is the other thing I choose to do, so that I'm always working kind of in the up direction. So I'm always starting at the bottom and working up like this. Add another row here with brown. So I'm always working in this direction. This is how I am most comfortable working it. And then the next row, I would just flip it again and work up again. How you work the stitch is going to depend on what you're comfortable with. If you want to flip it, if you don't want to flip it, if you want to work horizontally versus vertically, it's kind of up to you. It's something that you will just have to kind of practice and see what works best for you. So that was flat even count peyote stitch, my first video tutorial. I recommend starting with something like this, each row being a different color, or maybe just working in one single color so that you become comfortable with working the stitch. And then once you're comfortable, I would say you can move on to patterns, which we will be covering in future videos, both reading a graph and reading a word chart, because those have its own hurdles. So thanks again for sticking around for my first tutorial. Go ahead, leave a comment below. Let me know what you thought. Let me know what I should change, what I can add, maybe what stitches you want to see next. I know I have a list of things I want to do. So thanks again. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I can't wait to see you next time. Happy beading!